May 14, 1940. Anthony Eden's voice crackles across British radios at 9 in the evening, just after the news. The Secretary of State for War speaks with measured urgency about German paratroopers dropping behind defense lines in Holland and Belgium, about the need for men to come forward and defend their country. He calls for volunteers between 17 and 65 to enroll at their local police stations as local defense volunteers. The government expects perhaps 500,000 men might answer the call. Within 24 hours, 250,000 men have put down their names. In Berlin, the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht takes note, but the German High Command remains focused on France, where the Wehrmacht drives toward the Channel coast with stunning speed. Britain seems a problem for later, after France falls. By May 20th, just 6 days after Eden's broadcast, the number reaches 400,000 volunteers. Men queue outside police stations across Britain, many still wearing their work clothes from the factories and farms. Some are veterans of the Great War, others barely old enough to serve. They arrive with shotguns, with sporting rifles, with nothing but the desire to defend their homes. The German military doctrine has always been clear about such forces. Civilians who take up arms against German troops after regular forces have withdrawn or surrendered should be shot on sight. The Wehrmacht considers this a matter of military law, established practice going back to the Franco-Prussian War. Armed irregulars deserve no quarter, but this is different. This is not partisans forming in secret after occupation. This is a nation-state formally organizing its civilian population into an armed force before the invasion even begins. By the end of June, the number of volunteers approaches 1.5 million men. The magnitude of this mobilization presents problems that the German planners have not anticipated. Operation Sea Lion, still being sketched out in its preliminary stages, assumes that once the Wehrmacht establishes a beachhead and drives inland, the British population will collapse like France did. The plan depends on speed, on shock, on the political will of the British government breaking under the weight of military defeat. But how does an invasion force achieve speed when it must fight through not just the British army, but potentially millions of armed civilians defending their own towns and villages? The Abwehr, German military intelligence, attempts to gather information about British defenses. The results are meager. General Günther Blumentritt, who serves as Chief of Operations Staff for Army Group A under Field Marshal von Rundstedt, will later write that intelligence from England was extremely poor. They do not know which beaches are mined. They do not know where the coastal defenses are positioned. They do not know what field fortifications exist, and they certainly do not have detailed information about this rapidly expanding force of civilian volunteers. By mid-July, the local defense volunteers number approximately 1.3 million men. On July 16th, Hitler issues Führer Directive No. 16, setting in motion preparations for the invasion of Britain. The directive sets 4 preconditions. The Royal Air Force must be beaten down, the English Channel must be swept of British mines, the Strait of Dover must be blocked with German mines, and the Royal Navy's heavy ships must be driven from the Channel. Nowhere in the directive does it mention the civilian militia that now equals the size of the entire British army that evacuated from Dunkirk. On July 22nd, Winston Churchill officially renames the local defense volunteers as the Home Guard. The change is partly propaganda, partly practical. The new name sounds more martial, more organized, more like a proper military force. 1 million armbands bearing the letters Sarpash, DAP become obsolete overnight. Another million must be printed with Fa, instead. The German propaganda apparatus seizes on the Home Guard as evidence of British desperation. Radio broadcasts from Berlin describe them as gangs of murderers who will not be regarded as lawful combatants under the rules of war. The message is clear. If German forces land in Britain, any Home Guard members captured while bearing arms will face summary execution. This propaganda serves dual purposes. It aims to discourage British civilians from joining the Home Guard by threatening them with death if captured. But it also reflects genuine concern within the German command structure about the legal and tactical complications posed by armed civilians. The Geneva Conventions provide protections for lawful combatants, but the definition matters. Members of militias and volunteer corps qualify for prisoner of war status if they meet 4 conditions. They must be commanded by a person responsible for his subordinates. They must have a fixed, distinctive sign recognizable at a distance. They must carry arms openly, and they must conduct their operations in accordance with the laws and customs of war. The Home Guard, by August, begins receiving uniforms. They organize into battalions, companies, and platoons with appointed leaders. They wear identifying armbands and, later, full military dress. They carry their weapons openly. The British government ensures they meet the technical requirements for lawful combatant status. But German military doctrine does not bend easily. The principle remains. Civilians who resist German occupation deserve no mercy. Hostages will be taken. Villages will be burned. The same methods employed in Poland and would later be used in the Soviet Union apply in Britain if Sea Lion proceeds. By mid-November, the Home Guard numbers 1.7 million men. This figure exceeds the entire strength of the British Expeditionary Force that fought in France. It represents approximately 1 in 5 men in Britain not already serving in the military or in reserved occupations. The scale of mobilization has no precedent in modern warfare. For German invasion planners, the implications multiply with each passing month. The Army's plan calls for landing 13 infantry and mountain divisions in the first wave, followed by 8 panzer and motorized divisions, then 6 more infantry divisions. These forces must establish beachheads, drive inland, capture key objectives including Dover and Portsmouth, and advance on London. Speed is essential. The Royal Navy will attempt to cut off the invasion force from resupply. Every day the Germans spend fighting on British soil increases the risk of catastrophic failure. Now imagine those divisions must fight not only against the British Army's regular and territorial forces, but also against armed resistance in every town and village. Every crossroads could be defended. Every bridge could be held. Every building could become a fortified position manned by locals who know the terrain intimately and have no avenue of retreat. The Home Guard receives training throughout the summer and autumn of 1940. Tom Wintringham, a communist who commanded the British battalion in the Spanish Civil War, establishes a training school at Horsley Park. He teaches guerrilla tactics, ambush techniques, and how to destroy tanks with Molotov cocktails. 5,000 men pass through his school between July and October, when the War Office takes control. The training emphasizes that the Home Guard will not fight as a mobile force. Each unit defends a specific local area. They establish battle platoons of 25 to 30 men at operational strength, though volunteer numbers run roughly twice that to account for men's full-time jobs. In the event of invasion, these platoons will fight independently, without wireless communication until 1942, reporting through designated runners. The German planners must account for this in their invasion timeline. How long does it take to clear a defended town when the defenders are static, dug in, and willing to fight to the death because they are defending their own homes? A report dated September 12th from German intelligence attempts to assess British ground forces. The assessment is more or less accurate regarding overall strength and number of divisions, but it contains little detail. The Germans believe British forces divide between coastal defense and mobile defense forces. They assume the mobile force consists of at least 1 armored division and 7 partially motorized infantry divisions concentrated around London. The report optimistically projects that even with southern England's good road network, it would take 4 to 5 days after landing for the British counterattack to develop in full force, assuming the Luftwaffe does its part. This assessment makes no detailed mention of the Home Guard. German intelligence either lacks information about the force's size and organization or fails to properly integrate it into operational planning. The maps drawn up from aerial reconnaissance show pillboxes and barbed wire barriers. They show anti-aircraft positions, but they cannot show the human element, cannot quantify the determination of over 1.5 million men preparing to defend their country against invasion. Throughout August and September, the Luftwaffe attempts to establish air superiority over southern England. The Battle of Britain rages in the skies above Kent and Sussex, above the proposed landing sites for Operation Sea Lion. German losses mount. The Royal Air Force refuses to break. On September 7th, the Luftwaffe shifts strategy, beginning sustained bombing of London. The change reduces pressure on RAF airfields and fighter stations, allowing Fighter Command to recover and regroup. The strategic shift represents a fundamental misunderstanding of what is required for successful invasion. On September 17th, Hitler postpones Operation Sea Lion indefinitely. The official reason is the Luftwaffe's failure to achieve air superiority. But the decision reflects multiple compounding factors, each making the invasion more dangerous, more costly, more likely to fail. The Kriegsmarine has lost over half its surface fleet in the Norway campaign. The invasion flotilla consists of converted river barges and merchant vessels, hopelessly vulnerable to the Royal Navy. The English Channel remains under British naval control. Supply lines across the Channel would be tenuous at best. The RAF has not been defeated. German aircraft continue to fall from British skies at unsustainable rates. The British Army has rebuilt since Dunkirk, though it remains under-equipped and under strength by pre-war standards. And Britain has mobilized over 1.5 million armed civilians into an organized defensive force that will contest every foot of ground. No German planner can confidently project that the Wehrmacht will achieve the rapid breakthrough and advance necessary for Sea Lion to succeed. The invasion would become not a swift campaign like the fall of France, but a grinding battle of attrition against an entire nation in arms. The strategic calculus proves simple in the end. Germany cannot guarantee air superiority, cannot guarantee naval superiority, cannot guarantee rapid advance through organized resistance, cannot guarantee political collapse of the British government. The preconditions for successful invasion do not exist and show no sign of materializing. The Home Guard continues to grow. By March 1943, it reaches its peak strength of 1.8 million men. The force evolves from men carrying shotguns and makeshift weapons into a well-equipped, well-trained organization, manning anti-aircraft guns, coastal artillery, and defensive positions across Britain. But its greatest effect comes earlier, in the summer and autumn of 1940, when the scale and speed of British mobilization helps convince German planners that Operation Sea Lion cannot succeed. The implications extend beyond mere numbers. The Home Guard represents something the Wehrmacht has not encountered in its previous campaigns. In Poland, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, regular armies fought and were defeated, and the civilian populations largely acquiesced to occupation. Resistance movements would form later, operating in secret, vulnerable to reprisal. Britain presents a different problem entirely. The Home Guard exists openly, legally, in uniform. It is not a resistance movement that might emerge after occupation. It is a standing force of over 1 million men who will fight from the moment German troops land on British beaches. The German doctrine for dealing with civilian combatants relies on terror. Shoot civilians who resist. Take hostages. Burn villages. These methods work against scattered partisans operating without legal status or international protection, but they cannot work against an organized force of 1.5 million men who meet the technical definition of lawful combatants. The Germans can threaten all they want through radio broadcasts. They can call the Home Guard gangs of murderers, but if they actually invade and begin executing prisoners on a massive scale, The propaganda cost would be enormous. Neutral nations, particularly the United States, would react with horror. The Germans would be seen as committing atrocities not against guerrillas but against a nation's legal defense force. Yet treating Home Guard members as prisoners of war creates its own problems. The Wehrmacht would need to establish prisoner camps, provide food and security, divert resources from combat operations to handle potentially hundreds of thousands of captured civilians. This assumes the Home Guard units would surrender rather than fight to the death defending their homes, which seems unlikely. The alternative is to avoid combat with Home Guard units entirely, to bypass defended towns and villages and drive straight for London. But this creates untenable supply lines running through hostile territory. Every German supply convoy would be vulnerable to attack. Every isolated garrison would face siege. The Wehrmacht's standard tactics of rapid advance and encirclement cannot function when the entire civilian population is armed and organized. Some German officers question whether Hitler ever seriously intended to invade Britain at all. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt later claims the entire thing was a bluff, pressure tactics to force British capitulation. Adolf Galland, commander of Luftwaffe fighters, describes a palpable sense of relief in the Wehrmacht when Operation Sea Lion is finally called off. Whether bluff or genuine intent, the rapid mobilization of the Home Guard contributes to the invasion's unfeasibility. Britain demonstrates that it will not collapse like France. It will not sue for peace. It will fight, and it will fight with every resource available, including over 1.5 million civilians willing to defend their homeland with whatever weapons they can carry. The German High Command faces this reality throughout the summer of 1940. Each new report of British mobilization, each piece of intelligence about fortifications and defenses, each assessment of Royal Navy strength and RAF capability adds to the mounting evidence that invasion cannot succeed. By November, with the Home Guard numbering 1.7 million, the calculus is complete. Operation Sea Lion exists only on paper. The invasion barges gathered in channel ports begin to disperse. The Wehrmacht looks east instead, toward the Soviet Union, where Operation Barbarossa will begin the following June. The Home Guard never fires a shot in anger at invading Germans. The invasion never comes, but the force's existence, its scale, its rapid organization, contributes to ensuring that invasion remains forever postponed. Britain's mobilization of over 1.5 million volunteers in the span of 6 months represents one of the most remarkable defensive efforts in military history. These men do not receive pay. They train in their spare time while working full-time jobs in factories, on farms, in essential industries. They prepare to defend their towns and villages with whatever weapons are available, from modern rifles to First World War relics to improvised explosives. The German High Command, planning an invasion across one of the most difficult bodies of water in the world, against the Royal Navy, against the RAF, against a British army rebuilding from Dunkirk, must also contend with this additional force of armed civilians. The compounding challenges prove too great. Operation Sea Lion dies not from any single cause, but from accumulated impossibilities. The Home Guard forms one piece of this larger picture, but a significant piece. It demonstrates British resolve. It complicates German operational planning. It raises questions about the laws of war and international perception. It adds over 1 million armed men to Britain's defensive order of battle. The men of the Home Guard spend 4 years training and preparing for an invasion that never arrives. On December 3, 1944, with Allied forces advancing through France and the invasion threat long past, the Home Guard stands down in a parade in London. The organization is officially disbanded on December 31, 1945. 1,206 members of the Home Guard die during the war, killed by bombing raids or accidents during training. They are not casualties of invasion, but casualties of preparation for an invasion that their very existence helped prevent. The strategic impact of the Home Guard extends beyond its military utility. It represents a nation refusing to surrender, refusing to negotiate, refusing to accept defeat as inevitable. When the German High Command assesses whether to invade Britain in the summer of 1940, they must account not just for military forces, but for national will. The mobilization of over 1.5 million volunteers in a matter of weeks provides tangible evidence of that will. In the end, the German High Command does not need to receive a specific report titled, quote, 2 to understand the implications. The intelligence reports, however incomplete, convey the essential fact. Britain has armed and organized a massive civilian defense force. Combined with every other factor making invasion unfeasible, this knowledge helps seal Operation Sea Lion's fate. The Home Guard's legacy remains complex. Popular culture remembers them through Dad's Army, a television comedy emphasizing their amateur nature and equipment shortages. But the historical reality shows a force that, despite its limitations, served a crucial strategic purpose in Britain's darkest hour. They made invasion more costly, more complicated, more likely to fail. They embodied British defiance when defiance seemed Britain's only remaining weapon. And they helped convince the German High Command that Operation Sea Lion could not succeed, ensuring the invasion that threatened Britain in 1940 remained forever postponed, forever just a plan, forever unexecuted. The men who volunteered in May 1940 could not know their mobilization would contribute to this outcome. They simply knew their country faced invasion, and they answered the call to defend it. Over 1.5 million men, armed with whatever they could carry, prepared to fight for their homes. That preparation, that resolve, that visible commitment to resistance, regardless of cost, helped turn the tide of strategic calculation in London's favor. The German High Command never invaded. The Home Guard never fought the battle for which they prepared. But cause and effect in strategy often work through deterrence rather than direct action. The force exists, therefore the invasion does not come. The relationship is not provable, but is nonetheless real. Britain survives 1940. The Home Guard contributes to that survival not through battles fought, but through a battle made too difficult to attempt.